Now, detonate the reality bomb!
I will build a great, great wall.
Some alien race to come down and threaten us.
Is the singularity near?
The truth is out there.
The military-industrial complex.
The 7 mountains of the influencers of culture.
To be as gods, you know.
Change has come to America.
Catapult the propaganda.
From a secure location on top of the ridge in the heart of the beautiful Missouri Ozarks, this is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
There are dark corners of the Bible that never seem to see the light of day on Sundays in our churches, and that'll be the topic of our conversation today. Why are they there, and why should we pay attention to them? Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. If you're listening at VFTB.net via podcast or watching at youtube.com/Derek Gilbert, we thank you for doing so. If you're watching the video, click the little red button in the corner there where it says subscribe, and you'll get an email alert every time I post something new here. Our guest is a gentleman who's written a book that caught my attention several months back, and we made connection because we've got a couple of mutual friends here. He's written a number of respectable books like Waters of Creation, A Biblical Theology of Baptism, Galatians, A Supernatural Justification, Covenant Theology, a Reformed Baptist Primer, and then there's this one, Giants, Sons of the Gods. That's the one that got my attention, of course. He's also a co-host of the Paranormal podcast, which examines peer-reviewed research into the supernatural, along with a number of previous guests here on A View from the Bunker, Dr. Michael Heiser, Brian Godawa, Doug Overmeyer, and Natalina. Trey Strickland, the resident layman on that podcast, as he is on Dr. Heiser's Naked Bible podcast. It is our pleasure to welcome the author of Giants, Sons of the Gods for the first time to this program, Doug Van Dorn. Doug, welcome.
Hey, thanks a lot, Derek.
In addition to, I should also point out that in addition to writing the book, Giant Sons of the Gods, you wrote the Unseen Realm Question and Answer Companion for Mike, and you also serve as pastor of Reformed Baptist Church of Northern Colorado in the Boulder area. So not only are you approaching this topic of giants in the earth in those days, the biblical Nephilim and Anakim and the other tribes related to them, but you're doing this as someone who is standing up in the pulpit on a weekly basis, which is a bit unusual. First of all, what is it that attracted you to this particular topic?
I suppose as a pastor, you get asked weird questions on a regular basis. And one of the most regular of those questions is, what are the Nephilim in Genesis 6? And I did not have a good answer for it. So I was preaching through Exodus years and years ago and do my normal research on the internet. And I came across this article on Deuteronomy 32:8 and 9, and read the whole thing. I was completely captivated by it. Had no idea who the guy was, but it was in a respected journal, so thought I'd read it. Put it away. Preached a few more sermons. Did a little more research. Came across something else that sounded almost exactly like that article, and I wondered if it wasn't written by the same guy. And turns out it was, and it turns out that guy was Mike Heiser. And so, probably like a lot of people out there, I just started devouring everything that he wrote because he's writing about stuff that people ask me about, but I don't have any good answers to. And that also, frankly, are just really interesting to think about, supernatural kinds of things. And so at that point in time, he was giving out a book for free that he was working on that would later be Unseen Realm. He was calling it The Myth That Is True.
Right. Yeah, and I've got a copy of that myself.
Yeah. So, I was so into this that I made an index of keywords for that book so that I could study it quicker, And so over the course of reading that book, and knowing that he was going to publish kind of the main stuff of the Divine Council, I got into the Giants for, like I said, people asking me the question about that, and I wanted to know. He talked about it a little bit in The Myth That's True, but he didn't go into great detail. So I thought there was some room there for kind of more scholarly treatment of the Nephilim than what I had seen before. There's been pop culture kind of Christian books on the Nephilim for a while, but I want to do something a little bit more serious. And so I really do a biblical theology of the giants, going from Genesis through kind of the history of the Old Testament up through Esther, and then taking it into the New Testament with Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I will say for readers who are not familiar with your book that just looking at a couple of chapters in here, and I've been reading it off and on over the past few months because I've been spending a lot of time trying to write my own book, and I find it's difficult for me to find the time to read others while I'm doing mine at the same time. But just in the first chapter alone, by the time you reach the beginning of chapter 2, you're already over 100 footnotes. So this is not something where you're just drawing stuff out of thin air and out of various pop culture references and other internet level research. There's a lot of study that's gone into this. When you began digging into this and trying to tackle this topic, how difficult did you find it trying to find reliable information on this particular topic?
Well, you and I were discussing kind of before the show just a little bit about how more secular scholars or liberal Christians have kind of, they go into Old Testament studies and they've known about this stuff for several decades, since the discovery of what are known as the tablets at Ugarit, which is a city just to the north of Israel. They discover all these tablets and they start digging into it. And so it's not hard to find liberals that will talk about it. It's hard to find conservatives that will talk about it. I think the reason, my suspicion is that the reason for that is liberals kind of chalk it off as just a bunch of nonsense, and it's kind of a way that they can poke fun at the Bible. I don't take that view. I take it pretty seriously. But so I've actually learned to appreciate some of their writing and honesty with the text, where some of my own friends aren't. It kind of skip past it. It's not quite something that they want to deal with. So,
yeah, one of the things that surprised me is the Ugaritic tablets that deal with the veneration of the dead and the ancestors, and some of the very specific tablets that summon the spirits of the Rephaim and summon the spirits of what's called the Council of the Datanu. Liberal scholars look at it, they know about it, they discuss it back and forth. You can find it in many academic journals, references to these tablets, but it seems as though they just look at it as a window into the psychology of ancient man. Instead of saying, these guys were trying to contact the spirit realm, something that God told Moses to tell the Israelites, don't ever do this.
Do it. Right.
And it's so the strange thing then is that the conservative Christian should look at this and say, well, this is something that the neighbors of the ancient Israelites were doing. The Ugaritic culture was at its peak at about the time of the Judges. So just after Moses and Joshua led the Israelites into Canaan, we know for a fact from this archaeological evidence that the Canaanites were doing this stuff. So why then don't our conservative Bible-believing brothers and sisters look at this and say, see, this is an example of what God was talking about, because the neighbors of the Israelites, we can document, we're absolutely trying to be necromancer, involved in necromancy, summoning the dead, and summoning people that were specifically mentioned, not just in the Bible, but in Greek mythology. And, God doesn't just make stuff up to tell people, don't do this thing that nobody's doing and wouldn't even work if you did it.
Right.
I mean, to me, that doesn't make any sense. Let me ask you this. From your colleagues in the clergy, when you start discussing, if this topic comes up, what kind of response do you get from other pastors saying, you actually talk about this in the pulpit?
Yeah. So I'm from a pretty conservative group of folks. Take the Bible really seriously. Hail from the Reformation. And I think for my tradition, some of this comes from the tradition itself, where, you all the way back to Augustine in the 400s, and then to Calvin and Luther, starting the Reformation. And they're all talking about this, but they kind of poo-poo it. And they really don't say nice things about the view. They call it silly myths of Jews and call people who believe in it really foolish and
ignorant.
Just kind of, just name calling. They're not really actually doing exegesis of the text, but that's we just kind of inherit those kinds of things in our traditions. And so if I can bridge that gap with people and show that there's actually serious scholarship behind this, which was really one of my purposes in writing the book, was to kind of some of my own friends. You can have a decent conversation with them, but it takes a little bit of time to kind of get it started.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Is there a sense among other pastors that they just don't want to touch it because they are concerned about being not taken seriously, not only by the congregation, but by the denomination?
I don't know about that. It's possible. I have another theory, which is that it's not unique to me. There's a journal article on, I think it's called demythologizing. It's on Genesis 6. And his idea is basically that we have so gotten away from the supernatural in trying to understand, our worldview. We're influenced more by materialism and evolution and rationalism, kind of those 19th century movements. We're more influenced by those than we really think. And so you start to bring up some of this stuff. Giants, demons were giants at one point in time. They've been disembodied, and giants come from angels. And how can that possibly happen? And it becomes very materialistic sorts of presuppositions that drive people in their thinking of why it couldn't possibly be true.
Mm-hmm. When you began digging into this for your own curiosity, was there a point? At what point did you satisfy your own mind that this literally was the case, that the Nephilim, that giants literally walked the earth at some point?
I actually didn't have a problem accepting it really right from the beginning. I mean, I was reading Mike's paper on Deuteronomy 32, and that just made a ton of sense to me. And then when I started reading his Myth That Is True book, I just was kind of swept along in the story, and it just never really crossed my mind that why would this be false? There's good documented proof why it's true. There's scholarship behind it. I certainly believe that the Bible is true. It's not, telling me lies or anything like that. I might not have had the glasses on before that, but I guess I just didn't have much of a problem putting on the glasses. So when I come across people that do have that problem, it initially kind of took me back, to be honest.
Yeah.
I was surprised by it.
Well, I've run into that too. I got some pushback on the recent interview I did with Mike on his book, Reversing Hermon, recently. Some YouTube comments from a gentleman who was just convinced that this is all ludicrous, that the sons of God could not have possibly mated with the daughters of women. And besides, sons of God doesn't really mean angels anyway. So,
right.
Well, let's talk about that. Because this is one of the main objections that people who do not accept this view, that the Genesis 6 verse 4 account of the origin of giants and Nephilim literally means divine beings mating with human women. How do you respond when somebody says that can't happen because Jesus said the angels in heaven don't marry or give in marriage, so they cannot procreate?
Yeah, well, I say, well, go to the text and let's see what it actually is saying. It says that they don't. It doesn't say that they can't. Those are two very different English words. Mm-hmm. It talks about angels in heaven, so it seems to be implying the angels that haven't fallen. That doesn't say anything about the angels that have fallen. Angels are called men. They're not in the Bible. They're not called women. I kind of go back and forth. Are there female angels or whatever? We don't know from Scripture, but they're called men. And when they come to earth and they're actually touched and they eat and they have their feet washed by Abraham and that kind of stuff. I mean, they appear as men. The people in Sodom and Gomorrah certainly seem to have understood what they were. And they, that whole story of Sodom is a very sexual story. So, to just kind of use that proof text of Jesus, I think you're trying to make it say more than it's actually saying.
Yeah, the key words in that phrase being in heaven. Angels in heaven don't give and give, but it doesn't necessarily apply to those that have decided to come to earth. At the end of the first chapter in the book, Giants, Sons of the Gods, you draw an interesting parallel between some ancient symbols and the modern symbol used by the medical profession, the caduceus. What is the significance of these dual entwined serpents?
Man, I don't know. I think it's I put that in there because it's fascinating to me to see this idea of modern DNA, looking at it through microscopes, and then going back and seeing this catechist thing and how it's associated with, I think, Hermes. And a couple other gods, but God of healing, the messenger god in Greek mythology. And you should look at this and you go, there's something that's very strange. Why is this associated with healing? Why is this associated with medicine? I don't know the answer to it. So I kind of put that as I wanted the book to be fun a little bit.
Yeah.
So a lot of research, but I wanted to put some stuff in there that I thought is intriguing. Whether or not I come to a conclusion about it or not, I don't know.
Well, I did some of that as well in my book, just because I stumbled onto something I hadn't expected to find in researching that period of ancient history, looking at the ancient Near East of even the pre-flood era, the Ubaid culture, which, let's say 4000 BC, just to pick a rough number, and prior. It looks like everybody in the ancient Near East was engaging in cranial deformation. Mm-hmm. Before they could write, they were making their kids into cone heads, and I don't know why that is. But anyway, you've got an interesting image here in the book, the enthronement of the Serpent Lord, and it shows what looks like a cylinder seal or some sort of inscription of a king on his throne, and on both sides of this image, you've got the dual serpents enthroned. Mm. I'm finding this really interesting, and I'm going to have to find out where that image came from, because I just noticed on this image you've also got the crescent moon above, next to the king. And one of the things that has surprised me recently is learning how important the moon god was in the ancient Near East. Oh yeah, even more so than say the chief Babylonian god Marduk. But anyway, I digress. I'm hijacking the conversation back to my own book, and I apologize for that. So the significance, as long as we're in that part of the world and that part of history, of Babel and the link between giants and Babel, what did you find in your research?
Well, the most interesting thing to me, there's a couple of them, the whole idea of what the tower is in the first place. I think you guys actually talked about this on a recent program on Skywatch, that these this tower is really what they call a ziggurat. And its purpose was to kind of be a man-created version of a holy mountain, where God would come on the holy mountain, and this would be a place where the two realms, spiritual and earthly, would interact with each other. Mm-hmm. They even named their ziggurats after that concept, so that we know exactly what it is that they were doing. Yeah. You find these things all over the world. I mean, you find them in the Middle East, you find them in South America, you find them in North America, you find them in China. So this is a universal concept that these people, were somehow trying to link with heavenly beings. And then out of that, the other interesting thing to me is this fellow Nimrod, who really is kind of the only guy in the whole table of nations there in Genesis 10 that has anything said about him. Mm-hmm. And there's actually been a couple of pretty interesting journal articles on who Nimrod is in terms of connecting him with the myths of other nations. And you find connections with like Orion and Hercules, mm-hmm. and maybe even Marduk. I don't remember, but kind of the stories of this hunter god who goes and he gets all these trophies. I mean, they seem to fit with what's going on with Nimrod, and yet you look at who those guys all are, and they're all demigods, which is a half god and a half man, which that fits right into the whole kind of storyline of what the Nephilim are in the Bible. Yeah, that really is interesting, because one of the things that surprised me was learning that the god worshipped it in the city of Tyre during the reign of Ahab and Jezebel. And of course, the king of Tyre was Jezebel's father. Was called Baal, but Baal is just a generic word meaning Lord. Yeah, it was actually Melkart, which is the Phoenician name for Hercules. So the priest. No, I didn't know that. Really?
Oh yeah. In fact, the Greek historian Herodotus said that when he visited Tyre, he saw the tomb in the temple of Melkart, the tomb of Melkart. Huh. And he was one of the dying and rising gods, like Tammuz and Adonis and others, which makes Elijah's comment that, well, maybe he's gone on a journey, or maybe he's sleeping. Maybe it's the wrong time of year. Maybe this is the fall and the vegetation's dead, and that's why your God can't hear you. But isn't it interesting that it's possible? And again, this is something secular scholars have known and just never bother to mention to anybody who goes to church.
Right. It just stays in academia.
Yeah. That one of these demigods was is now a Disney cartoon. One of these Nephilim that God condemned. The age of the giants, though, didn't end with the flood. I mean, clearly Nimrod was post-flood, but there were other giants in the earth that are mentioned. In fact, you named your blog after one of them. One that was called the last of the reference, the Og blog, right? Og is an interesting character, and of course he would have been long after the time of Abram, but the giants were still there, kind of waiting for the Israelites to show up. Coincidence, I'm sure. Yeah, if I was a coincidence theorist. Where did the giants come from post-flood, and what was their purpose? Why were they there in the land?
Well, where they came from, there's all sorts of theories about it. I mean, the Jews were wrestling with this very same question back in the day. And so, you kind of left with options like the flood wasn't a universal flood. So some of them just lived through it. That's not one that I think is valid. Some people think that like the DNA was carried on the ark with one of maybe the wives of one of Noah's sons or something. Mm-hmm. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me, because I think that the reason why that family was picked was precisely for the opposite reason. The one I think makes probably the most sense is that the original incursion before the flood, in the days of Jared on Mount Hermon that Enoch talks about, that those watchers, those sons of God, were locked up in Tartarus, like Peter tells us, and even like the Greeks tell us the same thing. I think that it probably happened again with another batch of heavenly beings. Mm-hmm. That's the one that makes the most sense to me. It actually makes sense of a really strange passage in 1 Corinthians where it talks about how women need to have their head covered because of the angels.
Right.
There's actually, believe it or not, there's scholarship on that, which kind of links it back to the Genesis 6 story.
Mm-hmm. And because of the way they understood human physiology in that first century era, there's some connections to the reproductive process.
And hair and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. They get into some weird stuff.
You include a chapter here on the what you call the patriarchal giants and Abraham and the interactions he may have had while he was in Canaan with the Amorites who were in the land, who 400 years later his descendants had to push out of the land.
Right.
Who or what giants might later Abraham have encountered during his time in Canaan?
Well, the biggest one that I think is pretty certain is the whole story going on in Genesis 14. I call them the giant wars. There's this like confederation of like these vassal kings that are near Canaan that fight against these like greater suzerain kings that come from the east and the north.
Right.
And you start looking into the names of who those guys are, and then you start reading some of the people groups that are involved in that story. Like, it becomes weird very quickly. And, you actually find some of the clans that are explicitly listed as giant clans later in the Pentateuch are actually there in that story with, these wars with Abram.
Mm-hmm. So the kings from the east under Kedorlaomer and the other kings that came with him had to go to war against some of these giant clans on the east side of the Jordan, right? The Transjordan.
Right. Yeah, I mean that seems to fit the whole story of then going into the conquest and taking over the land that Moses and Joshua were involved in. So I mean, it just fits. It fits the storyline and it fits the names, and we don't have absolute proof that was what was going on, but it sure seems to make sense, and it makes sense of why it would be included in kind of the story. I mean, one of the most interesting things to me about writing this book was that I kind of see the giants as almost a golden thread that is, becomes a gospel thread. throughout the whole Bible. And you people say, well, there's no giants in the New Testament, but there are. But they're in a different form. They're in the form that all the church fathers thought the demons of the New Testament that possess people, that they are the disembodied souls or spirits of the Nephilim. Mm-hmm. And the reason they thought that is because, what is a Nephilim? It's half heavenly, it's half earthly. And so where do their souls go? They don't go to hell. They don't go to heaven. They kind of are in the air. They're in this middle place. Mm-hmm. And so demons are thought of as creatures of the air. So like this thread goes through the whole Bible, and it really becomes that you asked a question earlier that I forgot to answer, which is kind of like, why are they there? And the reason why I think that they're there is because their purpose is for God to defeat them as Israel goes into the land, and he shows that he's the one who's truly victorious, the conqueror, he's the giant. There's kind of an irony thing going on with the mighty men. You have the mighty men of Joshua and the mighty men of David, who are really, compared to these other mighty men, they're like real little tiny runts.
Yeah.
It's kind of God's way of kind of in your face to these inhabitants of the land of Canaan, that doesn't matter how big you are, it doesn't matter where you come from, Yahweh can dispose of whoever he wants to. Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned, of course, that the Jews understood that and this is in the book of Enoch, that the spirits of the Nephilim, because they were a hybrid product, they were not the spirits of humans, they were not the spirits of angels, but they were some sort of admixture of both, were denied access to the heavenly realm after death, and were condemned to walk the earth or to roam the earth.
Right.
But even the Greeks, Hesiod, who wrote a lot of what we know about Greek cosmology, the Greek mythology today, mentioned that the heroes of the Golden Age, the age ruled by Kronos, the Titans, who were thrust down to Tartarus by Zeus and the Olympians, although not really, it was Yahweh who did that. Were the spirits of the daemons. It's just that the demons to the Greeks were helpful spirits. They're here to help us, make our lives better and easier. So, but it's like getting the same news account, but from a totally different. It's like getting the Fox News version and the Al Jazeera version of the same news story.
Exactly. Exactly.
And this makes me wonder: is this perhaps why Satan is referred to as the prince of the power of the air?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Just speculating.
Yeah, he has Satan and his angels. I think Jesus talks about hell was prepared for them, and the dragon and a third of the stars of heaven. So there's no question that he kind of is a commander of a host of other beings that are underneath him. And the air part would certainly fit with the demon stuff.
Well, let's bring us into the New Testament then, because I think if you accept that premise that the giants, the spirits of the giants, spirits of the Nephilim, are the origin of demons. And then we look at the New Testament, we see that a major part of the ministry of Jesus is casting demons out. Brian Godawa put it very plainly, and it had never occurred to me before that Jesus was essentially waging war against the giants.
Right.
Because they were what was left of the giants, and he basically was saying, get off my land. What kind of reaction do you get when you start talking about this with folks in your congregation or other pastors saying, hey, look, these are the same guys that were walking the earth before the flood. Jesus was still having to contend with these things, 4,000 years later. Right.
The way I always kind of approach it is to say, first thing we need to do is go back and see if there's any reason to think that the church understood that the demons to be this way. And
right.
Sure enough, you go back to the early fathers, and it's universal across the board in the first 2-3 centuries of what they thought demons were. And it wasn't until later that the view kind of came in, and I don't even know how this happened. I haven't looked into it, but most people today think that a demon is just a fallen angel.
Right.
It's like a bad angel. So you got good angels and bad angels are demons. That wasn't the view at all. And it wasn't the view among the Jews either. So it was kind of across the board, Jew, Christian, they held this view of what a demon is. And when you can kind of root it in the history like that, I think it makes it a lot easier for people to kind of at least would be willing to entertain what you're saying with regard to like a cosmic war, something like that.
Yeah, and I should give credit to Dr. Judd Burton too, because in his book Interview with the Giant, he also goes into that and makes that plain that this is something that was a major part of Jesus versus the giants. It's like, what? Yeah, but it makes sense when you think about it. And again, this is what Mike Heiser's writing about in his new book, Reversing Hermon. It's part of the ministry of Jesus. He was casting out the demons because that was part of the product of the fall of the Watchers at Mount Hermon. So how important then, I mean, again, this is all really fascinating stuff, and it makes certain stories in the Bible easier to understand why certain things happen the way they did. Certainly the transfiguration on Mount Hermon makes more sense when you understand that that's where this other sin took place. Jesus was going up the mountain basically to reclaim it and say, hey, you thought this was your holy mountain? Here I am, come get me. But how does this impact us today? I mean, what difference does it make for Christians today, so that we should even bother thinking about any of this?
Yeah, that's kind of where the rubber meets the road question, right? And the way I answer is that if you go back to the very first proclamation of the gospel in the Bible, Genesis 3:15, and it's kind of that curse upon the serpent, and it talks about Jesus is. It says that there's two seeds that are going to be kind of playing along through the history of the Bible, and one of Eve's seeds is going to crush the head of the serpent. Mm-hmm. But the serpent's going to have a seed, and so the Bible talks about that seed in two different ways. It talks about it in a spiritual way, so that Jesus can refer to the Pharisees as your father is the devil. You think your father's Abraham. He's not speaking biologically. He's talking about in a spiritual sense. They're not converted. They hate God because they hate him, that kind of stuff. But if you trace out the physical side of this, starting really at Noah's flood, and then moving on through this theme of the giants, and then into the New Testament, and you see what Jesus is doing, then suddenly that proclamation of the gospel kind of takes us back. And the way I look at it is it's not a either or. So what did Jesus' death do? Well, it's a substitution for my sin. Mm-hmm. It's an atonement for me. It's a substitutionary atonement, a very classic Protestant idea of what the atonement is. But, the earlier fathers held the idea of Christus Victor is what he does at his death. And I don't see it as an either or. I see it as a both and. And when you look at what Jesus' death is through the lens of Christus Victor, which is where Jesus defeats Satan at the cross, and then that would include those who are under him. It would include the proclamation in the later Apostles' Creed, he descended into hell. That kind of an idea that you find in 1 Peter 3, where he goes and he preaches to the spirits in prison. I mean, it just fits right in line with this, his conquering as the king, so that he can so that anybody who is in slavery to Satan, which is the way we all were by birth, especially Gentiles, because God gave the nations over to the heavenly beings.
That's right.
And now his proclamation, because he's defeated them and he has authority over them, all authority in heaven and earth. I mean, this gets at a root reason why he is able to take anyone out of those nations that he wants to and save them, and not have like a problem in the courtroom of heaven for doing so.
That's a fascinating concept too, that there's a legal concepts, legal matters involved here, and that his sacrifice as the only person to live the law completely, perfectly, was required in order to give him the right to do what he did. But you're right, the whole idea that, going back to the post-Babel incident where God said, you don't want to deal with me, you're going to have to deal with my subordinates. I'm going to put them over the nations. And then you get to Psalm 82, where he calls them back together and says, because you've been showing partiality to the wicked, though you are sons of God, all of you will die like men and fall like any prince. And then God will take back all of the nations onto himself. For me, it makes reading the Bible a lot more interesting than it ever was before.
Yeah, I mean, Derek, you bring up Psalm 82, the very last verse. We could talk about verse 6, where Jesus is talking about how he's one of the heavenly beings in John 10.
Mm-hmm.
But the last verse is really kind of the kicker for me. It says, "Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit all the nations." Well, that harkens back to Psalm 2, where it's not God in general, because people might read that and say, okay, like the Father inherits the earth or something like that. But that's not it. In Psalm 2, it's ask of me anything you want, my son, and I'll give it to you, even the nations, that you will inherit them, you know. And so the connection between Psalm 2 and Psalm 82, and then going back to Deuteronomy 32, where first the angel of the Lord, Yahweh, is the one who gets Israel for his inheritance, okay?
Right.
And then the promise, because of Abraham, where he's the father of many nations. Now that starts to be predicted more clearly in the Psalms, with Psalm 2, Psalm 82, and then Jesus, that's exactly what he's doing, according to prophecy and according to legal covenants and that kind of stuff. That's this whole thread going along. And the giants are kind of a fun way of helping people see this greater thread of, first of all, how they're in slavery, and second of all, how it is that they're able to be let out of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how the enemy is real, literal, intelligent evil that seeks to destroy us, and how the lengths that God has gone to in order to circumvent their rebellion and buy us back, in spite of the fact that a big part of the rebellion was on humanity to begin with, because we were willing accomplices.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Every thought of his heart was only evil all the time.
Exactly.
Like the flood is blaming us for this. So.
Exactly. So you're going to tell us how to make weapons and practice sorcery and stuff. Okay, the women are over there.
Right.
That's kind of the way that went. That is fascinating stuff, and that's an interesting observation. One of the things that Sharon and I have discovered in going through our weekly Bible study, which we record and put online, is how many references there are in Scripture, Old and New Testament, to this whole divine council idea and to this rebellion of the gods. Paul, right? You talk about slavery again, and this idea that we were enslaved, about how we've been enslaved to the elemental spirits of the earth.
Stoicheia.
Right. Which most commentators, most Bible teachers will say, well, that just means, the principles of legalism and the law and blah, blah, blah. Just explaining the supernatural aspect out of it. But elemental spirits, you ask any New Ager what that means, and they know.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that Paul had that same idea in mind when he was writing there. But it doesn't ever get transmitted that way to people sitting in the pews on Sunday mornings. I know how this has affected me. How have you presented this to your church, and how has your congregation responded to this divine council concept? Because I assume, as it was for me, I assumed that for many of them this was new stuff.
Yeah, for all of them, 100% across the board. They've received it very well, but I think the harder thing hasn't been starting it, but it's been kind of having to reteach it when new people come into the church. You can't just take for granted that new people know it, because they don't.
Right.
So you're always having to go back to the ground zero in order to explain what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do, I look at it as it's not. It hasn't done anything in terms of taking away something that I used to believe and I no longer believe it because of this. It's more that it's added to what I've believed.
Yes.
It's like doubled my view of the Scripture. So, when you have a very grounded, robust view of what's happened down here on earth, but you don't really have a way of explaining heavenly things. Now all of a sudden you can explain heavenly things and earthly things. And now you can start making links between the two, in ways that you never even conceived of before, because you have divine counsel, because you have giants, because you have this war of the seeds and so on.
Yeah. Let's talk about that, because I'm starting to see some discussion of the old serpent seed doctrine that William Branham used to teach back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, which that's outside the bounds of orthodoxy. That's beyond the edges of what the Bible allows. What is the difference between this war of the seeds and the serpent seed doctrine, this idea that Cain and his descendants were literally the progeny of Satan and Eve?
Yeah, I think it's a textual question, Derek. It has to be rooted in the text. And you go to Genesis 4:1, and it just couldn't be any plainer that Adam is the father of Cain. So right there, that just kind of puts the nail in the coffin. And people, I've seen just even this week, somebody started to put little questions on their Facebook about, well, is that what it's really saying? And it kind of reminded me of kind of what Satan did in the chapter right before that. Is that what God really said? I mean, it's very obvious that Adam is the father of, Eve knew her husband and she conceived Cain.
Right.
So you stick with the text. That's what the text says. Is there weird stuff going on at the fall? Probably. I mean, it's a weird story, but that's not weird. That's just, it's plain. But then when you go to Genesis 6, and you start looking into what people have interpreted that as and what the rest of the Bible seems to interpret it as, that's a different story because you're sticking with the text and the Nephilim, it is what it is.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. You don't need to get any weirder than what's already in the Bible.
Yeah.
I used to think, my wife and I started down this journey more than a dozen years ago by writing some fiction. And years and years ago when I was a kid, science fiction was my preferred entertainment of choice. I read a lot of hard science fiction, Larry Niven, Isaac Asimov, guys like the Heinlein, mainly writing from an atheistic worldview. And I used to believe there was no way you could write creative fiction or speculative fiction from a Christian worldview. And I realize now how misinformed I was. When you look at the Bible and look at what's actually in there, you've got angels and devils and demons and warlocks and wizards and sorcerers and monsters and giants. Right. You've got a palette that includes every element that you could possibly want: heroes and villains and epic battles and divine intervention on a biblical scale. Pardon the pun. It's incredible when you get into it. And I agree with what you say, that this isn't taking anything away that we as Christians believed before. What it does is it enhances it, because now you realize what is going on here. You've got these angels who've exercised the free will that they were created with to try to rebel against God. And boy, that leads to some interesting speculation. I mean, if they rebel against God, maybe they're not all on the same page with each other either. And there are things going on. There's a lot of stuff there that we will probably never know until Christ returns and we can ask him directly. But what's in the Bible should be enough to keep anybody who takes their faith seriously really interested. And if you want weird stuff, let's get back to toward the end of your book in chapter 13, appropriately enough.
That wasn't on purpose.
No, but just adding there, just somebody out there probably scribbling down this. I think, okay, he probably went like this while he was behind the scenes too. You did discuss some of the chimeras and strange creatures that are included in the Bible, and people may be surprised to learn that there are creatures, goat demons like Pan, satyrs mentioned in the Bible. Other chimeric creatures as well, dragons, monsters like Behemoth and Leviathan. Where, in your research, what opinion did you reach as to where these beasts came from and what purpose they serve in God's grand design?
Oh man, so I tried to stay pretty safe on that. Like I would describe that, so like there's these passages in Isaiah that talk about several of these creatures, mm-hmm. and they're there, and so you can either say, well, he's using them as an illustration, or he's certainly using them as an illustration, but are they real, or were they real, or whatever? Mm-hmm. So I think the safe side of this is to say that they are demonic, and that those demons are real demons. That seems to imply that at some point in time, if a demon was embodied, and now they're not, that mm-hmm. they were probably physical creatures. I don't speculate in the book about it, but that's my suspicion. And then you start getting into some really weird things like, how could this take place? And that takes you right back to the DNA and the catechist and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Like, I just don't know the answer to it. So I do think that angels are incredibly intelligent. I think they've been around for a very, very long time. Mm-hmm. And I think that men are capable of doing some really crazy genetic manipulative things today. Mm-hmm. So I suppose if an angel wanted to, he could probably figure out a way to do something back then.
Yeah. Interesting speculation, but as long as you label it, and as long as you label it as such and don't try to build a doctrine on it, I mean, that way lies, the kingdom of the cults. Fascinating stuff, and there's just so much there, and we'll stop here at the risk of leaving people hanging. But in showbiz, you always want to leave them wanting more instead of wishing you'd stopped sooner. No, I confess I've not gotten all the way through the book, but I will, because this is right along the lines of the research I've been doing, trying to stick on the more archaeological side of the issue. And the thing that surprised me has been how much of the information you included in your book is known to secular scholars who don't give it any spiritual significance. Again, to their eyes, this is just ancient man, simple, not understanding the world in which he lived, yada, yada, yada. I'm seeing this stuff and saying, well, this just documents why God told, Joshua to go in and attack here first and knock these people out of the way, because they were worshiping this and summoning that. And, it's all there. And I just wish it was brought into the church. In your research, digging up this stuff, what was the if there was one thing that surprised you the most, what was it?
It could be some of the stuff I have in the appendices, which is just the sheer volume of giant stories that are out there. That includes the Bible. Who would have thought? One of the good ways to get in with people who are very skeptical is to say, well, you believe Goliath was real, don't you? You believe it was a giant, don't you? And almost everybody that I know believes that's true. So if you can believe there's one, you can certainly believe that there's more than one. Mm-hmm. And then, this idea that you find giant stories across the world, even on islands. Yeah. Some of the kind of the secular kind of giant hunters that are out there that have been kind of making a name for themselves since I wrote this book, that were doing kind of their own independent research of this. They go off and, talk about the American giants and that kind of stuff. I have a little bit of that in there, but it's really interesting stuff. I mean, so that's probably the biggest thing, I think.
Again, the speculation that these accounts did not arise organically, independently of one another, but there was one source somewhere back in history that has somehow been transmitted down through time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Doug Van Dorn is the author of the book Giants, Sons of the Gods, as well as a number of more respectable books. And he's the pastor of Reformed Baptist Church of Northern Colorado in Boulder, Colorado. And we'll direct you to, again, the excellent Paranormal podcast, co-hosted with Dr. Michael Heiser, Brian Godawa, Doug Overmeyer, Natalina, and Trace Strickland. You'll find that online at paranormal.com. And Doug, your website is dougvandorn.com?
Yep.
Okay. There'll be a link to that in the show notes as well. I appreciate you taking time out in the middle of the week for this fascinating stuff. We'll have to talk again.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Derek.
Check the show notes below if you're watching this on video at youtube.com/Derek Gilbert, or check the show notes at VFTB.net if you're just listening to this in audio form. And you'll find a link to Doug Van Dorn's website and where you can get a copy of the book Giants, Sons of the Gods. Recommended because it is well-researched and footnoted. Good stuff. Some speculation in there, which is okay. I get into speculation in my book. As long as you label it as speculation or opinion, I've got no problem with that. The problem is when you get works that purport to be giving you fact, which are not quite supported by the evidence. And plus, I'll also put a link to the podcast that Doug co-hosts with Natalina, Doug Overmeyer, Brian Godawa, and Dr. Michael Heiser, the Paranormal podcast, where they look at peer-reviewed research into the paranormal, which is something that is unusual, but much needed. The big story this week, of course, is what happened on Friday this week. And that, of course, is the launch of nearly 60 Tomahawk cruise missiles by President Donald Trump on the orders of Donald Trump. He didn't physically, launch them himself, but ordered the launch of the 60 to an air base in Syria. The air base, which we are told is the base from which the Syrian government launched a sarin gas attack against a town in northern Syria. Now, I talked about this earlier in the week on Skywatch TV. My take on it was, look, we don't really know what is going on because it's a part of the world in which information is as much a weapon as the actual bombs and bullets that are flying. You might remember back in 2013 when Barack Obama drew a line in the sand, a red line, across which Bashar Assad could not step. And that red line was the use of chemical weapons. And then shortly thereafter, within a matter of days, in fact, chemical weapons were deployed. The New York Times was right on board immediately, declaring that the Assad government was responsible for that 2013 attack, when it turned out later that when the rockets that were used to bring the gas to, and this was in the outskirts of Damascus, to the neighborhood in Damascus, they found that the range of the rockets wasn't enough to have traveled from the base where they were allegedly launched from, the Syrian government base. So, in fact, it was the rebels who had launched a false flag attack to try to provoke the United States into attacking Assad on their behalf. So we have to consider the possibility that this may have happened again. And in fact, that is what many in our alternative Christian community are wondering. Many Donald Trump supporters were not very happy, including some very prominent ones like Ann Coulter, Laura Ingraham, Michael Savage, openly declaring this a false flag. Laura Ingraham was a little more circumspect, but Ann Coulter, Michael Savage in particular, were very direct in saying that this is a false flag and Trump has either sold out to or been co-opted by or conned by the neocons who've been itching for a war in Syria for a long, long time. They couldn't get Barack Obama, and I will give Obama credit where it's due. He did not allow himself to get pushed into a war when his intelligence experts were telling him we're not sold that this is something that Bashar Assad actually did. So, I mean, it's horrific what was used. Sarin gas is extremely toxic. At least 100 people killed, including women and children. And of course, the pictures of the women and children who had been killed immediately were deployed because, again, information in this ongoing war is a weapon. And in less than 3 days after the information about the attack was made public, we had launched about $75 million worth of cruise missiles at this airfield. Now, interestingly, while Donald Trump's supporters, many of them, were castigating the president for his decision, the neocons, disturbingly, were all in favor of it. Democrats were having their heads explode through cognitive dissonance because they can't admit that Donald Trump does anything right, and yet he was doing exactly what Hillary Clinton had promised to do through most of the election. So they were trying to figure out how to criticize Trump while not sounding like hypocrites, and they managed to find a way. The San Diego, what is the newspaper? I had it right here in front of me. The San Diego Union Tribune headline, "Why didn't Trump drop bombs or wage an even bigger attack on Syria?" Well, mainly because Russia's there, and if we start blowing up too much stuff, we run the risk of killing Russians and provoking a conflict with a nuclear-armed opponent, which is something we don't want. And in fact, we were told in the press conference that Trump had, when he announced this, that the Russians had been notified and told to get their troops out of that base before the missiles started falling out of the sky. This was a measured response to send a message. And I talked to Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis. You'll see that interview tomorrow on Monday, that is, on Skywatch TV. It's about a 10-minute interview. Colonel McGinnis is in favor of the move. Now, I trust Colonel McGinnis and his analysis. Not sure I agree with him 100% on this, but I'm willing to consider that as a consultant who has contacts in the military now inside the Pentagon. He himself is inside the Pentagon. In fact, he teaches at the Army War College, that he's got access to information that I don't have. So it is conceivable that the Assad government actually did deploy the sarin gas. I'm not sure, and I asked Colonel McGinnis this, what possible gain could there have been for Assad, considering that his forces were actually winning and rolling back the rebels? They had taken Aleppo, and ISIS was being pushed back toward Deir ez-Zor. They were being pushed out of Raqqa. In fact, I've seen reports that most of their high-level officials had been moved downriver to the city of Deir ez-Zor. So what possible gain would Assad hope to get by possibly provoking the United States into direct action against him, which so far the U.S. government has resisted? Don't know. Colonel McGinnis said that it's possible that Assad was testing Trump to see if this is something that Trump would respond to, unlike his predecessor. So conceivable, I guess. It may also be that Trump knew that the intel was not solid, but decided to take advantage of the situation to send a message. And this is Colonel McGinnis's analysis, send a message not only to Assad that he better not use weapons like this. If he didn't use them this time, that he better not use them ever again. Send a message to Russia that we're not going to tolerate this kind of treatment of anybody in this conflict. Send a message to Iran that their proxy, Bashar al-Assad, needs to be kept on a leash. Also sends a message to North Korea that these nuclear threats from Kim Jong-un will not be tolerated and will be met with a muscular response. And since this was done with China's President Xi in Florida for meetings at Donald Trump's home, it also sends a message to China that they had better keep their proxy, their junkyard dog, North Korea, on a very short leash, or the U.S. would do it for them. Now, do I favor a United States military response in Syria? No. But if we were going to do it for the purpose of sending a message, dropping cruise missiles is certainly better than putting more boots on the ground. Many of the Trump supporters who were outraged by this response, you do know that we've got troops on the ground in Syria right now. In fact, they're in such close proximity to Russian soldiers that a gentleman I met in Dallas last weekend, who knows people who are currently deployed in Syria, said that they're so close they can hear the Russians talking. Okay, at night. I mean, they can hear them and their positions talking in Russian, and they can hear the Americans. You know, it's like in World War I, where you can hear the German soldiers on the other side of no man's land. That's how close they are. So if we're going to be this outraged about the cruise missiles, we should probably also step up our response just to be consistent, okay, in letting the president know that we want to get our troops out of Syria. And frankly, I don't think American soldiers should be involved in what is a sectarian war between Sunnis and Shias in Syria and Iraq. I've seen some reports that indicate that members of Trump's administration are pushing for a deployment of American soldiers. Certainly there are forces inside the American government, most prominently Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham, who want American soldiers deployed to Syria. There was a really well-done interview by Fox News' Tucker Carlson of Senator Graham, in which Carlson makes it very clear why this makes no sense. We are in Syria literally fighting both sides. We're fighting against Assad, and we're fighting the people who are fighting Assad. We're fighting the Islamic State, and we're fighting the Assad government, which is fighting the Islamic State. It makes no sense. Unless the end game is other than what our government is telling us, which is probable. We've been told that it's to, change the regime, get Assad out of power. Why? Why? If we have the same kind of success in regime change in Syria that we had in Egypt and in Libya and in Iraq, we could wind up with an even bigger mess on our hands, and this one right on Israel's border. Also on the border of Jordan, which is also an American ally. Now, you'll note that this past week, President Trump also had King Abdullah of Jordan and President El-Sisi of Egypt in Washington for meetings, and both of them are supportive of this move, the response to the sarin gas attack in Syria, but they're no friends of Bashar al-Assad. Now, Assad is an Alawite. Alawites are a subsect of... Subsect, I just coined that word. A sect, a subset of Shia Islam. And most Shias and all Sunnis consider the Alawites to be heretics. The reason the Alawites, Bashar Assad and his father Hafez Assad before him, have hung on to power with an iron grip is because if the Sunnis, the majority Sunnis, get control in Syria, the Alawites are doomed. And the Christians and the Druze in Syria probably wouldn't fare much better. That's why the Christians and the Druze and the Alawites pretty much band together. It's for survival. It's a brutal part of the world. Now, does that excuse? Am I defending Bashar Assad? No, of course not. But when we start messing about and taking out strongmen in that part of the world, as we did with Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi, Hosni Mubarak, who, by the way, is finally out of jail now after 8 years, we wind up with a bigger mess and more people dying. So yeah, I'm in favor of getting Americans out of there as soon as possible. If there is any upside at all on this, it is that the Democrat narrative that Trump is Vladimir Putin's lapdog can finally be put to rest. I'll be really curious to see what the Democrats' talking points are come Monday, because I don't see how they can continue that narrative. They basically have been storyboarding this idea with the help of the New York Times and CNN and the Washington Post for weeks, and it's ridiculous. And of course, the missile launch Friday proves how ridiculous it is. Now, of course, it proves it at the risk of provoking a conflict with Russia. As I understand, Russia has moved a battleship in between American Navy vessels and the Syrian coast in the Mediterranean. So this is not a situation to take lightly. And again, I'm not trying to defend Donald Trump. Frankly, I'm still reserving judgment here. My gut feeling is that this is another attempt by the rebels to provoke the United States into taking out Bashar Assad, something that they've not been able to do. A desperation ploy because they're losing against the forces of Assad backed by the Russians. Any response against Assad's forces risk a conflict with Russia, which I think is not in America's best interest. Frankly, I think it would be stupid, especially over what's happening in Syria. The United States has no legitimate foreign policy objective in Syria. I'm all in favor of helping Israel defend itself against threats from Syria and Lebanon, Hezbollah, and Iran. But taking an active role in what's going on inside Syria, we shouldn't be there. What Trump does next will decide, I think, will help me decide whether or not I'm going to give up on Mr. Trump as president. This certainly is a turning point in his administration. And it certainly was an interesting weekend to look at Facebook because, as I said, many of his supporters are outraged. Many of the never-Trumpers are finally praising the president because they're getting him to do what they want, which is get involved in yet another Mideast conflict. And Democrats' heads are exploding. There we have it. Again, you'll get to hear from Colonel McGinnis directly tomorrow. That'll be tomorrow's daily update on Skywatch TV, and I'll add minimal comments on both sides of that. And we will see what other interesting talking points the Washington elites come up with between now and then. I think we'll leave it at that. Had hoped to have L.A. Marzulli for a full program on his new video series, The Watchmen Chronicles, but he's been extremely busy. I've been extremely busy. And so hopefully we can get rescheduled here in the next couple of weeks. I did talk with Pastor Casper McLeod, on Friday. That will be next week's program here on A View from the Bunker. You'll get it in video and audio. His new book, Unmasking the Future, features a foreword by me. So we'll talk about that book, and I just enjoy talking to Casper, whether we're recording or not. So that'll be the program for next week, and I will be a guest on his program, Spiritual Encounters, this coming week, and Sharon will be his guest next week, which I think is long overdue, especially because her new novel, Blood Lies, is now available. It's the launch of her series, the Red Wing Saga, something she's been literally working on since before we met, so more than 20 years. And I am very proud of her, and I can say after having read the first novel that you will come to really love the characters. If you enjoy a good supernatural thriller, you will like Blood Lies a lot. It's available now at Amazon in paperback and in Kindle, and I encourage you to read it. Just look for Blood Lies, Sharon K. Gilbert, and you'll find it there. We'll be doing a program about the series and about spiritual warfare in general, which is what inspired her to write the series, coming up later in May at Skywatch TV. And we'll put together a special offer on the book then. But if you're eager to read it now, again, the paperback and the Kindle are available now at Amazon.com, and also the overseas markets too. So if you're in the UK or in Germany, Australia, wherever, you can order it there without having to pay overseas shipping. We got smart. We've got more stuff coming up this year. We're just excited about the doors that are opening for us. April 30th, I'll be speaking at the Southside Apostolic Church. Probably got the name wrong. Southside Trinity Apostolic Church? I think that's it. In Joplin, Missouri. Fortunately, I didn't put the note right in front of me. Be speaking at their morning service at 10:45 a.m. Speaking, I believe, at an afternoon potluck around 2 o'clock, and maybe again in the evening. We're still working on the details there, but as soon as that's all finalized, I will formalize that and put that at the website, vftb.net, and also my personal website, derekpgilbert.com. Be talking about the topic of my new book, which is finally in. And, of course, I don't have a copy here in front of me. But we did get the truck. The truckload showed up on Friday at the Skywatch TV offices. So those will begin shipping. If you ordered it on the special package from Skywatch TV or pre-ordered from Amazon, those will begin shipping this coming week. First to fill the package orders from Skywatch TV, then Amazon will get their allotment. So thank you for your patience. That book going out very soon. Later this summer, in August, the Sign in the Heavenlies Redemption Convention, Boise, Idaho, August 18th through 22nd. We'll be joined by Pastor Paul Begley, L.A. Marzulli, Dr. Michael Lake, and more. Coach Dave Daubenmeier, I believe, will be there as well. This will be at the Riverside Hotel in Boise. And on Monday, the 21st, we'll get on board a motor coach and ride up to the Continental Divide to watch the total eclipse of the sun. Excuse me. Bit of a tickle. Sharon's outside cutting grass, and I'm allergic to grass. Excuse me again. So for more information, hearthewatchman.com. In September, the True Legends Conference in Branson. That's September 15th through the 17th. Steve Quayle, Tom Horn, L.A. Marzulli, Timothy Albareno, Dr. Michael Lake, and me, Pastor David Langford, and Spanish explorer Anselm P. Rambla as well, all in Branson, Missouri, the Mansion Theater. For more information, log on to gen6conferences.com. Don't wait, because this is, April, May, June, July, August, 5 months out, and it's already more than a third sold. So this one is going fast. Quayle, Horn, Marzulli, Albareno, Lake, and some guy named Gilbert, all on the same bill. So gen6conferences.com. And then coming in October, the Blessed Hope Prophecy Forum, October 13th through the 15th. That's at the Embassy Suites Hotel in Norman, Oklahoma. A great venue. 33 speakers. Gary Stearman, L.A. Marzulli, Dr. Randall Price, Dr. Tommy Ice, Bill Salas, Bill Koenig, Rabbi Jonathan Kahn, Tim Albareno, Brent Miller Sr., Brent Miller Jr., recent guests on Skywatch TV, or we recorded, they'll be coming up on Skywatch TV. Billy Crone, Carl Teichgrib, Dr. Ken Johnson, Dr. Michael Lake, Josh Peck, even Josh Peck. Colonel Bob McGinnis will be there as well. Tim Mahoney, the filmmaker behind Patterns of Evidence. Terry James from RaptureReady.com. And then, of course, Sharon and myself. All that and more. You find out more information and register at prophecywatchers.com. Our Bible study, Gilbert House Fellowship, back on track after a couple of weeks off. We're into the book of Revelation in the New Testament study. So you want to check that out. GilbertHouse.org. We upload those studies each week by about midday Sunday. Again, GilbertHouse.org, and all of the archives free, going back to Genesis 1:1. Appreciate you taking the time to give us a review. You can do that at iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever else fine podcasts are sold. And of course, we discuss the issues raised here at the Facebook page. That's facebook.com/viewfromthebunker, which is a production of Gilbert House and released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. The opening theme is by Kevin MacLeod. His website is incompetech.com. Opening announcement by DC Good. Remember, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.